They told you that meritocracy is a machine. You put in effort, the machine produces wealth. You study, you work, you save, and the gears turn in your favor. It is the most elegant promise of the modern world, whispered in graduation speeches, chiseled into the walls of every self-help book. The system insists hard work guarantees success. It is a lie so comforting that we built our identities around it. But every study of inheritance statistics shows generational wealth is the single strongest predictor of net worth. Not grit, not innovation, the accident of birth. For years, the success story industry has sold you a specific kind of hero, the garage inventor, the lone genius who defied the odds, ignored the skeptics, and changed the world. You've heard the name 1,000 times in the same breath as the Wright brothers or Alexander Graham Bell, but the version you heard is a sanitized myth. When you actually open the patent filings, trace the financing rounds, and read the letters they wrote in their final years, you don't end up at inspiration. You end up at a machine designed to extract the value from the inventor and leave the inventor with nothing. We are going to unwrap the most famous success story you think you know. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly how the system processes a genius. What happens to the person who produces more value in a decade than an entire industry does in a century? The answer is not wealth. The answer is dispossession. What if the real path to wealth was never taught because the system cannot afford for you to learn it? The official story begins with a birth. July 10th, 1856, in a small village called Smiljan, on the edge of the Austrian Empire's military frontier. The landscape was limestone and thunder. The boy was the fourth of 5 children. His father was a priest. His mother was illiterate, but could memorize entire epic poems and had a habit of inventing small household tools when she needed them. She passed on 2 traits to her son: a visual memory so sharp he could recall entire pages weeks later, and a compulsion to build the thing that existed only in his mind. He attended the Higher Real Gymnasium in Karlovac, where he excelled in mathematics and physics. Then the Technical University at Graz. Then the Charles Ferdinand University in Prague. Everywhere he went, he saw the same pattern. The professors taught the existing framework. But the boy saw flickers of something else. In his second year at Graz, during a lecture on direct current motors, he watched the professor draw a commutator, the device that flips the current direction every half rotation. Tesla raised his hand and asked why the current needed to be flipped. The professor said it was necessary. Tesla said it was a flaw. The professor told him it was impossible to create a motor without a commutator. That moment planted the seed. Tesla went for a walk in the park, reciting Goethe's Faust, and the image of a rotating magnetic field appeared in his mind fully formed. No sketches, no calculations on paper. He saw the entire system in his head, the stator, the rotor, the alternating current that would fire the magnets in sequence, producing a smooth rotation without sparks, without brushes, without the mechanical failure point that every direct current motor possessed. It was a creation so complete that he later claimed he could visualize every gear, every coil, with the precision of a blueprint. He never built a model first. The machine existed perfectly in his imagination. He graduated. He tried to sell the idea to European industrialists. They listened politely. They did nothing. In 1884, he scraped together enough money to sail to New York. He arrived on January 10th aboard the SS Königin Maria. He had 4 cents in his pocket. He also had a letter of introduction to one of the most powerful men in the country. This is where the official story pivots to a rivalry. But it was never a rivalry. It was a collision between two different operating systems for the world. Thomas Edison ran a direct current empire. His system worked in dense urban grids, sending power a mile at most before losing voltage. His labs churned out patents through brute trial and error. Edison tested 6,000 materials for a single light bulb filament. He measured success by how many prototypes he could burn through. He was a bricklayer of invention. Tesla was an architect of invisible fields. He did not test, he envisioned. When he explained to Edison that alternating current could transmit power across hundreds of miles using thin copper wire, Edison called the idea dangerous and impractical. Direct current was safe. Direct current was established. Direct current had the contracts. The infrastructure was already in place. Changing it would cost billions. Edison offered Tesla a job improving the direct current generators. Tesla worked 18-hour days, solving problems that Edison's senior engineers had abandoned. Within a year, he had redesigned the entire system. Edison promised him a $50,000 bonus if he succeeded. When Tesla delivered, Edison laughed and said the promise was only a joke. "You don't understand American humor," he said. Tesla quit on the spot. He spent the next year digging ditches for the power company. He was an immigrant with a radical idea and zero capital. This is the first crack in the veneer of the success story. The inventor had the vision. The inventor did the labor. The inventor delivered the solution. The man with the capital simply refused to pay. That is the original sin of the meritocracy. The gatekeeper who owns the gate also owns the definition of success, and his definition did not include handing $50,000 to a Serbian immigrant. Now stop. Look at the Federal Reserve survey of consumer finances. The bottom 50% of American households collectively hold less wealth than the top 1%. $2 trillion versus $30 trillion. That asymmetry is not a natural outcome of effort. It is a structural feature of a system where capital accumulation begets more capital accumulation, and labor, no matter how brilliant, is a cost to be minimized. Tesla's story is the extreme case of that law, but it is not an exception. It is the blueprint. The hidden truth of the success story is that the system does not reward production. It rewards capture. You can produce the alternating current motor, the Tesla coil, the entire architecture of modern wireless transmission. But if you do not control the capital that builds the distribution network, your creation becomes their asset. In 1887, Tesla secured a contract with George Westinghouse. Westinghouse was a competitor of Edison. He saw the potential of alternating current and agreed to license Tesla's patents. The license included a royalty of $2.50 per horsepower of installed capacity. Within 5 years, the Westinghouse Corporation had installed enough Tesla motors to generate billions in revenue. The royalties alone would have made Tesla the richest man in America within a decade. That is the hidden truth. Success is not about production. It is about capture. Tesla produced the future, and it was taken from him because he did not control the capital. If you want to keep seeing the blueprint behind the stories you thought you knew, subscribe to this channel, and in the comments, write the word that changed everything: capture. Then the panic of 1893 hit. The economy contracted. Westinghouse faced a liquidity crisis. He came to Tesla and said the banks were pressuring him to restructure. The royalty obligation was too high. If Tesla did not renegotiate, the company would collapse. The patents would be sold to creditors, and Tesla would get nothing. Westinghouse held out a piece of paper. A new contract, It canceled all future royalties in exchange for a one-time payment of $216,000. Tesla signed. He believed in Westinghouse. He believed in the mission. He believed the promise of alternating current was bigger than his personal fortune. That's $216,000, equivalent to about $7 million today, was the only cash he ever received for the most transformative electrical invention in history. The patents he signed away were later valued at $12 billion in 1950 dollars. One single invention powered every factory, every streetlight, every motor on the continent for a century. The inventor received a house in cash. The capital holders received the river that would never stop flowing. This is the part most people miss. Tesla was not fleeced by a villain. He was processed by a system. Westinghouse was not malicious. He was doing what capitalism demands, minimizing the cost of capital. The royalty contract was a cost. He eliminated it. Tesla was the variable. He was convinced to make the sacrifice for the greater good, and he was convinced by the very logic of the system that he had helped build. He believed that technology would liberate humanity. He did not realize that technology first had to liberate its inventor from his own patents. In 1891, Tesla demonstrated the Tesla coil before the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. The device looked like a hypnotist's prop. A copper cylinder topped with a toroid, discharging purple arcs that snapped through the air. But inside was a principle: resonant, inductive coupling. You could transfer power through space without wires. The implications were world-altering. You could illuminate a city with a single grounded transmitter. You could run trains without overhead cables. You could eliminate the electrical grid entirely. Edison's direct current proponents had already lost the war on alternating current. But the fight against wireless power was different. This time, the infrastructure was the weapon. Thomas Edison, along with the up-and-coming financier J.P. Morgan, controlled the copper mines. They controlled the wire factories. They controlled the distribution networks. A wireless power system would render their entire physical investment worthless. The magnetic field, carrying energy through the air, did not pass through a meter. It could not be measured. It could not be billed. The decision was not technical. It was economic. J.P. Morgan had funded Tesla's most ambitious project, the Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island. A 200-foot wooden structure capped with a 55-ton steel dome. Tesla intended it as a wireless power transmitter for the entire northern hemisphere. He had already proved the physics. In Colorado Springs 2 years earlier, he had lit 200 incandescent lamps from a coil 12 miles away, receiving power through the earth itself. The experiment was documented. It was repeatable. It was real. Morgan came to visit the tower site. He saw the copper cladding. He saw the 100-foot copper grounding rod driven into the saline water table. He saw the transmitter that would make his own copper mining operations obsolete. Within a week, Morgan stopped funding. The project collapsed. The tower was demolished for scrap in 1917 to pay a $20,000 debt. The $20,000 went to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel for Tesla's unpaid room service bill. This is where the numbers start to suffocate. Tesla owned over 300 patents in 12 countries. 112 of them were U.S. patents. By 1922, General Electric purchased 80% of those patents for $2 million. That sounds like a fortune, until you calculate what the patents would have been worth if the royalty structure had held. The radio patent alone, U.S., Patent 645,576 for a system of transmitting electrical energy through the natural medium was later ruled by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1943 to have priority over Guglielmo Marconi's claims. Marconi had built his radio empire on a patent that the court ruled Tesla invented first. But by the time the ruling came, Tesla had been dead for 3 months, and Marconi's company, which had already collected billions in licensing fees, was owned by the same group of banks that controlled the electric utilities. Let me be specific. The United States Supreme Court case, Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company of America versus United States, argued in 1942 and decided in 1943, explicitly stated that Marconi's patent was invalid and that Tesla's prior disclosures anticipated the claims. The ruling was unanimous, but Tesla had died on January 7, 1943, in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker. He had been living there for 10 years, paying $8 a night. His estate was valued at roughly $2,000, equivalent to about $30,000 today. He owned no real estate, no stock, no bonds. He had a few unpaid hotel bills and a stack of notebooks that the Office of Alien Property Custodian immediately seized because they feared the Nazis would get his wireless transmission theories. That night, a hotel clerk found his body. The coroner ruled the cause of death as coronary thrombosis. The FBI arrived within hours to impound his papers. They were classified for years. The man who had invented the modern world died alone, in a hotel room, while his patents generated revenue for corporations that he had never seen a penny from. The success story ended in a pauper's death, and the media apparatus that had celebrated Edison's funeral, a funeral attended by the President of the United States, where flags were flown at half-mast, barely noted Tesla's passing. The New York Times ran an 800-word obituary tucked inside the back pages. The lead paragraph called him a genius whose inventions changed the world. The second paragraph noted that he died almost penniless. This is the core mechanism of the wealth transfer system. The system generates enormous value from invention, but the inventor is a short-term asset. The capital that builds the distribution network is a long-term asset. The return on capital compounds across generations. The return on labor, even genius labor, ends at death. The inheritance captures the compound interest on the distribution rights. The inventor's children received nothing. The children of the capital holders received everything. But here is where the personal component enters. If you have ever worked a 60-hour week and still watch the numbers not add up, you know the silent anger that comes when the promise clashes with the paycheck. Tesla did not work 60 hours. He worked until he collapsed, sometimes for 3 days straight. He slept 2 hours a night in his final productive decade. He told a journalist in 1905 that he had not slept more than 4 hours in 30 years. He was not lazy. He was not undisciplined. He was not playing the wrong game. He was the most productive human being in his field, measured by any objective standard of output. And his reward was a hotel room and a coroner's report. You are not a failure for not getting ahead. You are a victim of the same mechanism that processed Tesla. The ladder exists, but the rungs are owned by different people, and they determine who climbs. The wealth mobility statistics from the Census Bureau's intergenerational elasticity tables show that a child born into the top 1% has a 5 times higher chance of staying in the top 1% than a child born into the bottom 20% has of escaping the bottom 20%. That is not meritocracy. That is inheritance of position, masked as earned success. The ones who always knew the score stop blaming themselves, and start seeing the system. That is the first step. What transforms after this realization? Not your income, not your job title. What transforms is your relationship to the story. You are told that if you build something great, the market will reward you. Tesla built the greatest electrical infrastructure ever conceived. The market extracted it from him. Now apply that to your life. How many times have you watched a corporation take an employee's innovation, patent it in the company's name, and then pay that employee a modest salary, while the executive stock options on that innovation made millionaires out of people who contributed nothing to its creation? The frequency of that pattern is not anecdotal. It is structural. The invention assignment agreements that every engineer signs at the start of employment are designed to transfer the value of the intellectual property to the corporation. The corporation then capitalizes that value on the stock market. The inventor receives a W-2. The capital holder receives a capital gain, taxed at a lower rate, inheritable by children without a tax event due to the stepped-up basis provision. The tax code itself was written to favor capital over labor. That structural theft is the real engine. The invention assignment agreement you signed on your first day was not a formality. It was a transfer of wealth. If this pattern resonates, subscribe to keep uncovering the mechanisms that extract value from your labor before you even see it. Drop a comment with your own story. What did you build that someone else profited from? This is not an oversight. This is the result of a lobbying feedback loop that has been running for a century. The corporations that benefited from Tesla's dispossession used their profits to fund the political campaigns of the legislators who wrote the tax code that protected those profits. The cycle reinforces itself. The IRS prosecution rate for tax evasion among the top 1% is less than 1% per year. The enforcement agency has been systematically defunded for decades. The laws are enforced against the bottom, not against the top. But notice this. The moment you see the blueprint, you stop making the mistake of blaming yourself. You stop telling yourself that you just need to work harder, or smarter, or longer. You recognize that the game was designed to produce winners before you entered it. That recognition is not cynicism. It is the sober clarity that allows you to make different decisions. You stop optimizing for a system that has already optimized against you. What changes now is your allocation of energy. You stop chasing the corporate innovation award that might lead to a promotion. You stop believing that the next startup equity grant will make you wealthy. The statistics show that the average startup employee's equity, after all dilution events, yield no more than a few $1,000s for the vast majority. The liquidity event rewards the funders and the founders. The employees receive a story of being part of something bigger. The same story Tesla believed about Westinghouse. If you are going to build something, build it without the assumption that the system will reward you fairly. Build it with the intention of owning the distribution. That is the lesson Tesla learned too late. He gave away the distribution rights. He owned the invention. That was not enough. The distribution is where the compound interest lives. You felt it, did not you? That moment when the promise clashed with the paycheck. You are not imagining it, and you are not alone. I have compiled the proof in a single document, the missing chapter they scrubbed from your onboarding, and I am sharing it with the ones who always knew the score. Comment receipts below. I will send the link. Now let me show you something the official version will never include. In 1901, the same year, J.P. Morgan pulled funding from Tesla's Wardenclyffe. Morgan formed the United States Steel Corporation. It was the first billion-dollar corporation in history. The capitalization was based on combining the assets of Andrew Carnegie's steel mills with several smaller competitors. Morgan dictated the terms. Carnegie received the largest share of stock, about $250 million in face value. But the structure of the deal was designed to ensure that Morgan's banking syndicate received the majority of voting stock. Carnegie got the paper value. Morgan got the control. 4 years later, Carnegie sold his remaining stock for $400 million. He spent the rest of his life giving away libraries. Morgan's syndicate still controlled U.S. Steel. The pattern is exact. The inventor produces the value. The capital holder captures the control. The inventor either spends their wealth on philanthropy, giving away paper that the system allowed them to keep, or dies penniless, having been told that their contribution was enough. Tesla could have been Carnegie. He had more patents than Carnegie had steel mills. But he did not have access to the capital syndicates that turned invention into perpetual revenue streams. He had George Westinghouse, who was a manufacturer, not a financier. Westinghouse had his own capital problems and was forced to surrender his company to bankers twice during his lifetime. The system processes the manufacturer the same way it processes the inventor. The capital syndicate is permanent. The productive asset is temporary. In 1915, a journalist asked Tesla why he never became rich. Tesla answered, "We can only detect radio waves. We cannot yet transmit power through the air. The future will show whether my invention has value." He was already 60 years old. He had already given away the patents for alternating current. He had already lost Wardenclyffe. He had already watched Marconi receive the Nobel Prize in Physics for a radio system that the courts would later rule Tesla had invented first. He still believed the value would be recognized in the future. The future came. The value was recognized, but the value was recognized by the capital that had already seized it. General Electric, Westinghouse Electric, and the Marconi Corporation continued to collect the royalties. Tesla's estate received nothing. The Office of Alien Property Custodian took his notebooks and filed them away. They were declassified in the 1950s and largely ignored until the 1980s, when a new generation of electrical engineers rediscovered his wireless transmission experiments and realized he had already solved problems that modern science was still struggling with. One of those engineers in 1990 wrote a paper showing that Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, if completed and operated according to his notes, could have transmitted enough power to light every streetlight in New York City without a single copper wire. The engineering analysis concluded that the terrestrial resonant cavity, the layer of charged particles between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, could have sustained an oscillating field that would have distributed power across the continent. The technology was not theoretical. It was built. The only thing missing was the capital to complete it. J.P. Morgan made the decision. The decision was not based on feasibility. It was based on the impact on his copper mining and wire manufacturing assets. Now look at the parallel. The same logic operates in every sector. In pharmaceuticals, the drug compound is discovered by a research team at a small biotech firm. The small firm is acquired by a larger corporation for a fraction of the drug's future revenue. The original researchers receive a signing bonus. The corporation receives the monopoly pricing power. In software, the algorithm is developed by a team at a university lab. The university patents it. The corporation licenses it for exclusive use. The researchers receive a citation in the patent filing. The corporation receives the market dominance. The mechanism is not a conspiracy. It is a structural feature of the capital allocation system. The value created by innovation is captured by the entity that controls the path to market. The inventor is on the supply side of a transaction, where the demand side owns the definition of value. The price for the invention is determined not by its future utility, but by the inventor's lack of leverage. Tesla had no leverage. He was an immigrant with no family wealth. He had no network of capital syndicates. He had no experience in corporate finance. He had an idea so powerful that it scared the capital holders into action. They bought his patents. They absorbed his company. They sold him a vision of the future that did not include him. The same dynamic is playing out right now, every day, in every industry where a person with no capital has a better idea than a corporation with a distribution monopoly. The corporation will pay the person a consulting fee, a license, or a salary. It will never pay them the full value of the idea, because the full value is not determined by the person. It is determined by the system that the corporation built and that the person cannot replicate without prohibitive capital. This is the core truth. Uncomfortable, unavoidable. The system extracts value from the creator and redistributes it to the capital holder. Not because the capital holder is more virtuous, but because the capital holder controls the bottleneck. The bottleneck is the distribution network. The bottleneck is the regulatory approval. The bottleneck is the legal monopoly. The bottleneck is the fact that the average person cannot build a copper wire factory from scratch. Tesla could have built a small motor in his basement. He could not build a transmission line to every major city in the United States. The capital required was not attainable through a loan. It was attainable only through a partnership with the very capital syndicates that would later extract his value. There was no way around it. The system processed him exactly as it processes you. The question is not whether you can beat the system by working harder. Tesla worked harder than any 10 people alive today. He died in a hotel. The question is whether you can identify the bottleneck and position yourself on the side of the bottleneck owner, rather than the side of the value producer. Because the system does not reward production. It rewards control. That is not a moral indictment of capitalism. It is a description of how capital flows within the legal and financial structures we have built. The structures are not natural laws. They were written by people. They can be rewritten by people. But first you have to stop believing that they are fair. You have to stop telling yourself that if you just produce enough value, the system will recognize you and reward you. It will not. It will recognize you as a source of extractable value. It will reward the person who owns the channel through which your value passes to the world. Tesla owned the invention. Westinghouse owned the factory. J.P. Morgan owned the financing. The capital syndicate owned the distribution. Tesla had the best cards of anyone in the room. He played them perfectly. He still lost. The game was not about having the best cards. It was about owning the deck. What does this mean for your worldview? It means the meritocracy is not a system of rewards. It is a system of rationalization. It justifies the distribution of wealth by attributing it to effort, when the data shows that effort explains only a fraction of the variance. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, repeated every 3 years since 1989, consistently shows that the strongest predictor of net worth is previous net worth, followed by inheritance. Income from labor, salary, wages, tips accounts for a declining share of total wealth accumulation for the top deciles. For the top 1%, capital gains, dividends, and business ownership income far exceed any wage income they receive. The richer you are, the more your money works for you, the less you have to. The implication for your worldview is that the moral foundation of the system is built on a false premise. You were told that the wealthy earned their position through superior effort. You were told that the poor deserve their position through inferior effort. The data does not support that story. The story persists because it serves a function. It keeps the people who are not wealthy from questioning the rules. Once you see the mechanism, you cannot unsee it. You stop evaluating your own life as a series of personal failures. You start evaluating it as a series of structural constraints. That is not a depressing conclusion. It is an accurate one. And accuracy is the precondition for effective action. The first action is to stop designing your life around a false metric. If the system does not reward effort, then optimizing for effort alone is a waste of your best years. You have to optimize for ownership of the distribution channel, or you have to accept that the value you create will be captured by someone else. Tesla could not own the distribution channel. The capital requirements were too large, but you can, in smaller ways, own the path between your work and your market. You can build a direct relationship with your audience or your customers. You can structure your work so that you retain the rights to its distribution. You can choose to operate outside the corporate capture pipeline. The cost of that choice is scale. You will not become as wealthy as J.P. Morgan, but neither did Tesla. The difference is that Tesla ended in a hotel room. You can end with your own decisions, your own freedom, and the quiet knowledge that you did not trade your birthright for a salary. That is the trade-off the system does not want you to see. If this realization landed for you, subscribe so you do not miss the next descent. We are only beginning to map the mechanisms that determine who captures value and who gets captured. And in the comments, tell me which trade-off is pressing on you right now. The choice between scale and freedom, between a salary and your own distribution channel. That answer will tell you where you actually stand. That is the transformation of worldview that this knowledge demands. You stop seeing wealth as a reward. You start seeing it as a product of position. And you start asking the only question that matters. Are you positioned to capture the value you create? Or are you positioned to be captured? If you have ever found yourself explaining away your financial stagnation with the story that you just need to work harder, this is the moment to break that thought. It is a form of self-protection, born from a system that programmed you to blame yourself. But it is also an illusion that keeps you in the extraction pipeline. The evidence is staring at you through Tesla's life, through the Federal Reserve tables, through the tax code. You do not need to work harder. You need to own the channel. And that brings us to the invitation. You have followed the unwrapping of the most famous success story you thought you knew. You have seen the mechanism. You have felt the shift in your own understanding. The thread is there, waiting for you to pull it further. What happened to the one person who cracked the code? Not Tesla, someone who faced the same system but navigated it differently. Someone who owned the bottleneck and used it not for extraction, but for liberation. There is a story that connects directly to the thread we just unwound. A story about an inventor who did not die poor, who did not give away the distribution, who built a controlled foundation that outlasted them both. A story about an engineer named Edwin Howard Armstrong, who invented FM radio in 1933 and spent the rest of his life fighting the same capital syndicates that had crushed Tesla. Armstrong held the patents. He built the first FM broadcast station. He proved the technology worked with a clarity that made AM sound like a broken washing machine. Then the Radio Corporation of America, RCA, the same network that had grown rich on Tesla's alternating current infrastructure, decided that FM radio threatened their AM broadcasting monopoly. They fought him in the courts for 12 years. They drained his finances. They isolated him from the industry. In 1954, Armstrong wrote a note to his wife, put on his overcoat, and stepped out of a 13th-story window in New York City. His estate finally won the patent cases after his death. The royalties totaled over $10 million. His widow received what the capital syndicates had refused to give him while he lived. The pattern is not a historical curiosity. It is the operating system of the modern economy. The same mechanism that processed Tesla and Armstrong processes the software engineer whose code becomes the backbone of a billion-dollar platform, the pharmacist whose formulation becomes a blockbuster drug, the filmmaker whose original concept becomes a franchise. The extraction is the feature, not the bug. The system was designed to concentrate value at the capital node, not the creation node. Every protection in the legal structure, the employment contract, the patent assignment clause, the non-compete agreement, the capital gains preference, the stepped-up basis inheritance rule, is a wall built to channel value upward and keep it there. You have now seen the full blueprint. The official story is a myth you were told to keep you optimizing for a game that was designed before you were born. The inventor is not the hero. The inventor is the raw material. The capital syndicate is the machine. The distribution channel is the real product. And the wealth that flows through that channel never flows back to the source. You can stop waiting for the recognition that will never come. You can stop measuring your worth by a metric that was calibrated to exclude you. The only question that remains is whether you will use what you have seen to design a different approach, one built on ownership of the channel, not on hope for a fair judgment from the gatekeepers. The answer is not in the next invention. It is in the first piece of infrastructure you build for yourself. The infrastructure I am describing is not a building. It is not a factory. It is a direct channel between what you create and the people who benefit from it. It is a relationship that does not pass through a corporate bottleneck. It is a way of working that retains the rights to the distribution, even if the scale is smaller. The scale is not the point. The control is the point. Tesla could not see that. He saw the world as a problem to be solved, not a system to be navigated. He believed that truth and utility would triumph over vested interest. He was wrong. The vested interest did not defeat his ideas. It absorbed them. It incorporated them into a larger structure that gave the capital holders more power than they had before. The alternating current motor that Tesla invented made the electric grid possible. But the electric grid was owned by the same capital syndicates that had funded Edison and blocked Tesla. The invention did not liberate the world. It consolidated the grip of the people who already held the wires. This is the uncomfortable final layer. The system is not hostile to innovation. It is hungry for innovation. It needs new sources of extractable value. The corporation does not fear the inventor. It needs the inventor. It needs the stream of new patents, new formulas, new designs that can be converted into revenue. The inventor is a renewable resource. The capital syndicate is the permanent infrastructure. The relationship is symbiotic only in the sense that a wolf and a deer are symbiotic. You are not a deer. You are a person with agency. The agency is limited, but it is real. It begins with the refusal to accept the false story that your financial position is a measure of your worth. It continues with the decision to examine every transaction in your life and ask who owns the bottleneck. It ends with the quiet satisfaction of building something that you control, even if it is modest, rather than building something enormous that you do not. The final truth of this investigation is that the meritocracy was never broken. It was never intended to be the system you were sold. It was a story designed to make the extraction process feel fair. The inventor works harder, receives less, and is told that this is the natural order. The capital holder works less, receives more, and is told that this is earned. The data has shown you otherwise. The life of Nikola Tesla has shown you otherwise. The Federal Reserve tables have shown you otherwise. What you do with that knowledge is yours to decide. But you cannot pretend after seeing the mechanism that the game is fair and the rules are neutral. You know the shape of the machine now. You know where the value flows and where it stops. And you know that the only way to change the flow is to own the channel yourself, or to build a system that does not require you to give it away. The infrastructure you build for yourself does not need to rival the Morgan syndicates. It needs to be yours, and that is enough.